Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, incredibly powerful precisely because it's so short,
That's right. We're doing a deep dive into Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address.
which clocks in at what, just 272 words, delivered right in the middle of this absolutely horrific conflict.
It really is stunning when you think about it. The linguistic efficiency, I mean.
Yeah.
Think about the setting. This wasn't just any speech. It was a dedication ceremony for a massive national cemetery.
Right at Gettysburg, where maybe 50,000 men had just fallen. The scale is hard to grasp.
The scale of the trauma, logistical, moral, historical, it was just almost unimaginable.
And yet Lincoln steps up.
He does. And he takes all that overwhelming weight, all that grief and division, and somehow in about 2 minutes,
2 minutes.
yeah, he manages to completely reframe the meaning of the war. He basically forges a new American identity right there.
That contrast, the tiny text versus the colossal moral weight, it's staggering.
It really is.
So for this deep dive, we're not going to just, recite the address. Everyone knows it or can easily find it.
Right. Our sources are really focused elsewhere. They're looking at the ingredients needed for that kind of profound communication.
What goes into making something like that?
Exactly. The character of the speaker, the historical context swirling around him, and his mastery of rhetorical purpose.
Okay, so that's our mission then, to kind of analyze how those things came together.
Precisely. What kind of leader, standing there amidst all that suffering, that political chaos, what gave him the integrity, the vision to distill everything down to such a potent, timeless message?
It's like a study in how words can literally save a republic.
You could put it that way, yeah.
Okay, before we get into the rhetoric itself, let's start with something maybe a little surprising. First nugget about Lincoln's, his lasting impression.
Ah, you mean Colonel Conwell.
Exactly. Colonel Russell Conwell.
Yeah.
Later famous for that Acres of Diamonds lecture.
Right. But back then, he was a Union officer. And he had this very chilling, very intimate encounter with Lincoln's final legacy.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's incredibly poignant. Conwell talks about the time right after the assassination. He actually stood guard, as he put it, for hours beside the dead body of the president as it lay in state in Washington.
Wow. Not just a quick viewing line. Hours.
Hours, alone with the body, essentially. That forces a kind of prolonged, silent contemplation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You're not just looking at a politician who died. You're contemplating a martyr in that context.
That's exactly the shift. And Conwell said that in those somber hours, he absorbed this immense impression of the work and worth of the man who there lay dead.
An immense impression.
And he specifically noted that this profound feeling never departed. He stayed with him.
So it highlights that Lincoln's legacy, his real weight, wasn't just cemented by his life's decisions, which were often messy and political.
Right, inevitably.
But by the sheer emotional significance of his death. A death that seemed to underscore the tragic necessity of the whole struggle.
Yeah, it's like his character, forged in that unbelievable fire, somehow transcended all the policy debates and became pure moral conviction in that moment.
That deep moral power feels like the perfect starting point for talking about his communication, especially at Gettysburg.
Definitely.
Because you mentioned the setting, he followed Edward Everett, right, who spoke for like 2 hours.
The very long, classical oration, polished, detailed.
And then Lincoln gets up, says 272 words, and that's what we remember. How does that happen? How can such a short message carry so much more weight than, 10,000 other words?
It's a fantastic question. And to really get a handle on it, we probably need to look back at the ancient masters of rhetoric, people like Cicero and Quintilian.
Okay. What did they say about brevity?
Well, it's interesting. Cicero, for example, he definitely talked about brevity, conciseness. But traditionally, he kind of saw concise speaking as distinct from the more elaborate style you needed to really commemorate.
To commover, meaning?
To move the audience emotionally, to stir them up. Cicero thought brief speaking was good for teaching, for explaining facts dossier, but maybe not so much for deep emotional impact.
Huh. But wait a minute. If Cicero thought you needed elaborate language to move people, isn't the Gettysburg Address like the ultimate counterexample?
Exactly. It's incredibly brief, yet arguably one of the most emotionally powerful political speeches ever, certainly in American history.
So what did Lincoln do? Did he just break Cicero's rule?
I think he found a very specific, narrow path. He managed to achieve both the dossier explaining the facts of the situation, the dedication, and the quemvir moving the audience profoundly.
How? If not through length or flowery language.
Through sheer intensity, I'd argue. Cicero did concede that to move an audience, You needed gravitas.
Gravity. Seriousness.
Yes, a seriousness in the sentences, and ponderibus, a sense of weight or importance packed into every single word. Lincoln absolutely delivered that. Every syllable feels heavy, concentrated with the meaning of the entire Union struggle.
So the quality of the words, not just the quantity.
Precisely. But there's another crucial piece Cicero insisted on. For the orator to truly move the audience, they must appear to feel the emotions they want to inspire.
Ah, authenticity.
Yes, the orator must seem to ardor, literally, to burn with the emotion. Only then will the audience follow.
So Lincoln's power wasn't just the words on the page. It was that the audience could see, could feel, that he himself was shouldering this immense burden of grief and purpose.
Absolutely. The man and the message were inseparable. His authority wasn't just his office, it was deeply moral, earned through visible suffering and conviction.
You can feel that burning intensity even reading it today.
You really can, and this connects directly to something Quintilian talked about with deliberative oratory.
Okay, what's deliberative oratory?
That's the kind of speech that advises action, that tries to persuade an assembly on what to do next. Quintilian noted that some people thought this kind of speech should only focus on expediency.
Expediency meaning what's practical, what's advantageous right now.
Exactly. What serves our immediate interests. But Quintilian points out that Cicero, again, saw it differently. Cicero believed deliberative oratory was primarily concerned with what is honorable.
Honorable versus expedient. That feels like a critical distinction for Gettysburg, doesn't it?
Absolutely vital. Think about the context. Lincoln needed to justify continuing an incredibly bloody war.
He couldn't just say, it's expedient to win, not after that much loss.
No, especially when addressing a popular assembly, the grieving public. Quintilian suggests, and Cicero would agree, you have to align your message with the moral core the audience understands, the honorable path.
So the original goal of the war, maybe preserving the Union, that was perhaps framed as expedient initially.
Arguably, yes. But by Gettysburg, the sheer scale of the sacrifice demanded something more profound than just political expediency. It wasn't enough justification.
So Lincoln uses this moment
To pivot, he elevates the conflict. He argues implicitly and explicitly that the fight is fundamentally about the honorable pursuit of a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He forces the audience to look beyond the immediate brutal practicality of war to the eternal moral law it serves.
That took immense courage, especially given the brutal facts he was wrestling with, the deep-seated hypocrisy in the nation's founding.
It did, and that's the necessary context, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's shift there. What were those profound historical inconsistencies that were tearing the nation apart? Why did the war's purpose need such a radical redefinition?
Where do we even start?
We have to start with the sheer, flagrant inconsistency that Frederick Douglass just relentlessly exposed.
Douglass's critiques are so powerful.
Devastatingly eloquent. He just laid bare the cognitive dissonance at the very heart of the American project. He'd point out how Americans would boast, about their love of liberty, their advanced civilization, while their entire political structure, their power, was pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of millions of their own countrymen.
It's a national performance of doublethink. The founders talk noble ideals, but the reality.
The reality was systemic denial. Douglass used this incredibly visceral comparison. He'd say, look, you welcome foreign fugitives, people fleeing oppression in Hungary or Italy. You greet them with banquets, speeches, you shower them with money.
Right. Celebrating liberty abstractly.
But at the very same time, you Americans advertise for, hunt down, arrest, shoot, and kill fugitives from your own land. Fellow Americans seeking the exact same freedom you celebrate in others.
That comparison is just brutal. Because it's true.
It highlights this profound, active, flagrant inconsistency. That was the moral backdrop. It wasn't just a disagreement over tariffs or states' rights in the abstract. It was a fundamental clash over truth and hypocrisy.
And crucially, this wasn't just, bad habits or regional issues. This injustice was baked into the system. It had been legally sanctioned at the highest level.
Exactly. We cannot forget the national trauma of the Dred Scott decision in 1857.
Right. Often cited by legal scholars like Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a key moment of, failure.
A profound failure. Chief Justice Taney's ruling wasn't just about Dred Scott himself. It fundamentally attacked the very idea of black citizenship and twisted the Constitution.
How so, specifically?
Taney held, flat out, that no person descended from enslaved Africans could ever be considered a citizen of the United States under the Constitution, ever.
Just categorically excluded.
And, perhaps even more damaging, the Supreme Court declared that the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, this clause we think of as protecting fundamental liberties,
Yeah.
actually safeguarded a person's property right to hold another human being in bondage.
So the mechanism meant to protect freedom was used to guarantee slavery.
It's the ultimate institutional betrayal of equality. The law itself was used to codify the denial of humanity.
An ideological wound that deep. It couldn't just be patched over. It needed something radical.
It demanded a radical counter-narrative. Dred Scott essentially said the legal foundation of the nation was rotten when it came to equality. Lincoln's task at Gettysburg, then, wasn't just dedicating a cemetery. It was like he was trying to overwrite that constitutional corruption with a higher law, the law of human equality, by proposing this new birth of freedom.
Wow. So if the highest court had legally endorsed this failure, the rhetoric needed to be powerful enough to basically refound the nation's moral premise.
Yes. And this connects, interestingly, to a Stoic idea.
Okay. Which one?
The idea that adversity isn't just something bad that happens to you, it's an opportunity, a chance to show your virtue, to do your best work, to use the obstacle itself as a kind of catapult.
Turn the obstacle into the way forward.
Exactly. The Civil War, this unbelievable national collapse, this violence was the ultimate obstacle. Lincoln's address, in this view, becomes the rhetorical catapult. He takes that failure, the hypocrisy, the Dred Scott decision, the immense sacrifice of blood symbolized by those fresh graves, and he uses it all as the foundation to launch a new vision of the Republic, one explicitly defined by equality.
Turning the grim reality into a transcendent, unifying purpose for the living.
Precisely. He harnessed the negative energy and redirected it toward a positive, demanding goal.
Which brings us squarely to Lincoln the man. We're talking about a leader who had to live through 4 years of just unimaginable violence, political backstabbing, the weight of those casualty lists.
Constant, unrelenting pressure.
How did he personally survive those brutal facts, the hypocrisy he was fighting against, the losses, the criticism, and still maintain the kind of moral clarity needed to deliver that call for unity and justice at Gettysburg?
It points to a really rare kind of psychological resilience, something that folks who study leadership, especially drawing from examples of extreme endurance like military POWs, sometimes call the Stockdale paradox.
Ah, the Stockdale paradox, named after Admiral James Stockdale, right? From his time as a POW in Vietnam.
That's the one.
Let's unpack that duality fully for listeners. It feels like it captures Lincoln's wartime struggle perfectly.
It really does. It's about holding two seemingly contradictory beliefs at the same time.
Okay, what are they?
First, you absolutely must confront and accept the brutal facts of reality. You cannot live in denial. For Lincoln, this meant facing the daily casualty reports, the political betrayals, the enemies even within his own cabinet, the sheer grinding difficulty of holding the Union together. You have to look the darkness right in the eye.
No sugarcoating the grim reality.
None. But second, and this is the crucial other half, you must simultaneously maintain an unwavering faith in the endgame, an absolute conviction that you will prevail in the end, that the nation will be preserved, and importantly, that it will achieve a just and honorable outcome.
That sounds exhausting, to hold both those things. To be fully aware of the terrible present, but utterly convinced of a better future.
Incredibly draining. He had to feel the weight of the losses, be deeply empathetic, yet remain internally detached enough to make hard decisions, to execute policy, without just collapsing into despair or cynicism.
Did sources note how he managed this, his personal coping mechanisms?
Yes, there are indications. To handle the immense stress and, well, his known struggles with depression, what some called melancholy.
Right.
Lincoln seemed to cultivate what one observer called a strong inner fortress, a kind of psychological defense that allowed him to endure, to keep struggling, without letting the brutal external reality completely overwhelm his internal state.
An inner fortress. That's a powerful image.
Isn't it? Admiral David Porter, who spent a lot of time with Lincoln near the war's end, he noticed this quality. He described Lincoln as someone who seemed to think only that he had an unpleasant duty to perform.
Unpleasant duty. Wow.
And therefore, Porter said, Lincoln set himself to perform it as smoothly as possible, almost a detached professionalism in the face of horror.
That emotional control. It's remarkable. Fighting to win, yes, but insisting on fighting justly, and then aiming to end it all with malice towards none, as he'd later say. That sets him apart.
It really does.
But was that restraint always seen as a good thing? Politically, I mean. Didn't he face criticism for not being angry enough, not punitive enough towards the South?
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial point.
Hmm.
Taking the moral high ground was often politically difficult, even unpopular.
How so?
Remember Quintilian? He observed that oratory, especially in wartime or conflict, often slides from trying to build goodwill, benevolence toward the audience, to stirring up hatred towards the opposition. It's a common, maybe even natural political tactic.
Use anger to motivate your side.
Right. But Lincoln consciously chose the opposite path. He seemed to actively suppress that natural urge for vengeance, for animosity. He focused the nation's energy not on hating the Confederates, but on upholding the enduring, universal principle of the Union and the promise of equality.
Leading with principle over passion or animus?
Exactly. Which wasn't just detached leadership. It feels like profound self-mastery in action.
You know, thinking about it in more modern terms, it sounds like a perfect illustration of Stephen Covey's private victories, those first three habits of highly effective people.
That's a fantastic connection. Yes, Covey's foundational habits are all about achieving independence through mastering yourself first, before you can effectively interact with others.
Right, from dependence to independence.
And you can map Lincoln's conduct, especially during the war, directly onto those habits. They seem almost like prerequisites for something like the Gettysburg Address.
Okay, let's break that down. How did those private victories manifest in Lincoln? Start with habit one.
Habit 1. Be proactive. Covey defines this as choosing your response based on your values, regardless of external stimuli or circumstances. Don't just react, act.
And Lincoln.
That's the essence of the Stockdale paradox we just discussed, isn't it? The external reality was horrific. Civil war, death, betrayal. Lincoln proactively chose the response grounded in principle, the new birth of freedom, rather than simply reacting with anger, despair, or pure political calculation. He was acting on the situation, not being acted upon by it.
Okay, habit two.
Begin with the end in mind. This is about having a clear vision of your destination, defining your core principles, your ultimate mission, so you can align your actions.
And Lincoln's end in mind was?
It clearly wasn't just win the war. That's a temporary objective. His end in mind, especially as articulated at Gettysburg, was defining the enduring purpose of the American experiment, grounding it firmly in equality, ensuring that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. That deep principle became like his personal constitution, guiding his actions through the daily storms.
Giving him that ethical horizon to aim for.
Exactly. Which leads to habit 3, put first things first. This is the habit of execution, of discipline, living out habits 1 and 2 day by day, prioritizing actions based on your principles, not just on urgency or pressure.
And for Lincoln, that looked like?
That looked like performing that unpleasant duty smoothly, as Porter put it. It meant prioritizing the preservation of the Union and the move towards emancipation over, say, immediate political popularity or satisfying the loudest calls for vengeance.
Making the hard choices based on principle.
Yes. Pursuing the war justly, aiming for malice toward none. Even when it was unpopular, that wasn't weakness. It was disciplined execution of a higher principle. Covey talks about this self-mastery coming from an unchanging core. Or, as Ryan Holiday might frame it through Stoicism, a disciplined ability to manage your perceptions and choose your actions. That emotional constraint was the victory.
It makes so much sense. The Gettysburg Address wasn't just words someone wrote down. It was the public expression of this incredibly deep, hard-won internal strength.
Exactly. And that demonstration of self-mastery wasn't just about him. It implicitly served as a model, almost a demand, for the citizens themselves to aim for a similar internal transformation.
So it wasn't just looking back, justifying the cost.
Not at all. This leads us to the crucial final point, really. The address's power wasn't just in explaining the past sacrifice. It was fundamentally about establishing a mandate for the future, creating a new national commitment for the survivors.
Okay. So this internal victory, this independence Lincoln embodied, what does that lead to on a national scale, if everyone achieves that?
According to Covey's model, it leads to the possibility of interdependence.
Interdependence, meaning?
While independence, the private victory, self-mastery is essential, Covey argues it's not the ultimate goal. The highest form of effective living is interdependence, people working together synergistically, achieving far more collectively than they ever could alone.
Like a high-functioning team or society.
Precisely. But here's the key. Covey insists that genuine interdependence is a choice that only truly independent people can make.
Why is that?
Because dependent people, those who are reactive, who blame circumstances or others, who lack self-control, They don't have the inner security or character foundation to engage in the give and take, the trust, the cooperation real interdependence requires. They can't choose it freely.
Okay, I see. So Lincoln's call then, that famous line about government of the people, by the people, for the people, enduring, and the call for a new birth of freedom.
It's fundamentally a call for a more mature nation, an interdependent nation built not just on laws, but on shared moral purpose and the individual character capable of choosing cooperation over division.
He's basically handing the survivors, the listeners, this massive collective responsibility.
Yes. Prove the sacrifice was worthwhile by choosing to operate at this higher level. Build this interdependent reality. The new birth of freedom wasn't just a legal change. It required citizens to engage with each other differently, morally, unified, honoring the principles they just fought and died for.
And you said earlier this starts internally. The speech demands reflection from each listener.
Absolutely. It's incredibly focused inward. It redirects psychic energy away from finger-pointing or external grievances and towards an internal commitment to that shared, elevated national goal.
It's the classic inside-out approach to change, isn't it?
Definitely. True progress, lasting change, has to start with character, with perspective, with the internal disposition. It reminds me of that profound quote Covey often used, originally from Samuel Johnson.
What's the quote?
The fountain of content must spring up in the mind, and he who hath so little knowledge of human nature as to seek happiness by changing anything but his own disposition will waste his life in fruitless efforts.
Wow. Waste his life in fruitless efforts if you only try to change things externally. Apply that to Lincoln's moment.
Lincoln wasn't primarily telling the North, here are the 5 new laws we need to pass immediately, or here's the infrastructure plan. At Gettysburg, he was demanding a change in the national disposition, a fundamental shift in their commitment to equality, to unity, to mutual respect.
Believing that if they got the internal disposition right,
Then the right policies, the right actions, the truly unified future would flow from that naturally. His incredibly concise message forced citizens to stop focusing all their energy on changing the other side or the external circumstances, and instead to look inward to their own moral commitment.
that internal shift focused on a shared goal. That was the key to making the Union endure after the war.
He clearly believed it was. That focused psychic energy was the foundation for the new birth.
This deep dive has really illuminated it for me. The incredible, lasting power of the Gettysburg Address. It's not just the perfect words, the brevity. It's inseparable from the character of the man who said them.
Yes, a leader who somehow managed that duality, facing the brutal reality head-on while holding on to unwavering faith in a just, honorable outcome.
He didn't just dedicate a cemetery, he basically tried to restart the nation's moral engine.
A revolution of national purpose in 272 words.
But it does leave us with a lingering, maybe uncomfortable question about conflict and how we resolve it.
We've talked a lot about Lincoln's challenge. Fight justly, end with malice toward none, aim for reconciliation. But decades later, you have someone like Theodore Roosevelt offering a kind of counterpoint.
What did Roosevelt say?
Roosevelt warned, quite forcefully, that progress in this direction towards justice is merely hindered by the folly that believes in putting peace above righteousness.
Peace above righteousness. That's a challenging thought. Don't we usually want peace?
Of course. But Roosevelt suggests that sometimes pursuing peace at any cost, particularly if it means sacrificing justice or core principles, is actually foolishness. It hinders real progress towards what's right.
So Lincoln defined the righteousness needed for that new birth of freedom.
Yes, but Roosevelt's challenge forces us, the inheritors of that legacy, to constantly ask. In any great conflict, whether national or even personal, how do we find the right balance?
The balance between what?
Between the active, necessary pursuit of righteousness, the moral equality Lincoln championed, and the equally necessary pursuit of peace and unity. When does one take precedence? When does compromising for peace betray the principle you fought for?
That's not an easy question.
Not at all. And finding that complex, delicate balance, navigating between those two vital poles, justice and peace, that remains the ultimate ongoing responsibility that Lincoln's sacrifice and those incredibly potent 272 words really bequeath to us all.